Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is the last session before lunch, and it's a great pleasure to have you all back in here. This is going to be a session about global energy security, and of course that is a major issue in itself. And right now we see real competing forces in play. On the one hand, we have a slump in global crude oil prices that is weighing heavily on prices, a global surplus of crude oil. And we have strong supply of natural gas. LNG capacity for global exports is set to increase by a third over the coming 4 to 5 years or so. So far so good, I suppose, at least in terms of the pure theoretical point of energy security goes. But then, of course, we have the other side of the equation. We have the geopolitical issues, Ukraine, the standoff between the EU and Russia. We have the Islamic State movement in Iraq. What kind of threat does that pose to energy disruption? We have Libya, which is continuing to see unrest there. So lots of other issues involved. Well, look, let me introduce our panelists so that we can get their views on all these things. First and foremost is Adel Ahmed Albuainain, the General Manager of Dolphin Energy Limited. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Marie-José Nadeau, the Chair of the World Energy Council. And we have Jos Evans, the Vice President for Gas and Power Market at ExxonMobil here in Qatar. And we have Lady Barbara Judge, who is a member of the UAE Advisory Board for the Development of Peaceful Nuclear Power in the UAE. So thanks very much. I'm going to start with you, Lady Barbara Judge. Give me your view on what the main challenges are to global energy security right now. Is this a serious moment for energy security?
I basically think it's always a serious moment for energy security. There are 3 questions that people need to be asking today about energy. Energy security, do we have enough energy? Energy independence, where is that energy? And climate change, because the world is now focusing as well on climate change. And actually, if you think about it, energy security, do we have enough energy? Well, if you have to deal with energy security and energy independence, there may be enough energy sources in the world, oil, gas, coal we were talking about before, but they have to cross national boundaries. And the security of energy is about the crossing of national boundaries as much as it is about having energy indigenous in your own country. And then when you put climate change on top of it, and the fact that there's a lot of focus, maybe not so much in this region, but in Europe particularly, and to some degree in America and Asia, about climate change, my opinion is that the only way to be energy secure is to have a mix of energy sources. You need oil, you need gas as a bridge fuel at least. People are burning coal because they have it, and it's cheaper than nuclear, which I also believe one needs to have energy security, and renewables, which are probably the most expensive. So that this is a moment that countries, given the geopolitical risk of what's happening in Russia, what's happening in parts of the Middle East, which we're not happy about, what's happening in various parts of the world, unless every country has some energy mix, they're always going to be dependent on another country, and they're not going to make it.
Right, give me an example of countries you think have got it right, or perhaps countries which haven't got it right. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I'll tell you about one that I think hasn't got it right first.
Okay, go ahead.
And that's Germany. Germany, which had an energy mix that was pretty interesting. It had gas, it bought some, but it had some. It had oil, some bought some. It had very good nuclear energy, and it had a strong renewables, and it had coal, and was doing everything right. Right after Fukushima, Mrs. Merkel, who was very strong, but her party was not, closed the nuclear power plants because there was a strong Green Party. Closed them, not just shut the door a little, but closed them. So now what's happening in Germany? Well, they used to have nuclear energy, but they don't. So they're buying gas from Russia, which is dicey, as we know at the moment. They're buying nuclear from France. Remember those little power plants right on the French-German border. They're burning coal, their own coal, and even worse, American coal, which is really the dirtiest and worst of all, lignite, worst. And they're trying to build solar and wind. Now, solar and wind may be very nice, but it's not baseload energy. It's only top up. It's very expensive, and it has to be subsidized. So what's happening to the poor German consumer? The German consumer is watching energy prices go up, and the German nation is watching emissions go up. And so things are, in fact, much worse than before, and Germany is sitting there with its industry complaining. So if you ask me which had it right, I haven't gotten you there, but which had it wrong?
Okay, right, thanks very much for that. I'm going to turn to Marie-José Nadeau. Tell me your views about the Russian crisis, the crisis in Ukraine. How much of a concern is that for real, or is it just the perception that EU fears that it could have an energy supply crisis?
Well, thank you very much. Coming from a global organization, we take not only a global view on energy issues, but we also like to take a long-term view on the same issues. And as much as this has been discussed, energy is a very fungible commodity, and there will be, if the gas is not coming from Russia, if there are cuts in the production or in the transmission, there will be other suppliers to fill in. So it may be costlier, but it's not a short-term nor a long-term issue. It's a political issue more than an energy issue.
Of course, but the EU, from the EU point of view, we see their security policy from last year. They're talking about trying to roll back the influence of Russia, and it's very in geopolitical terms. It's very clear. I mean, that's just purely politics? You say there's no rationale behind it, no practical rationale.
I will say the same as Lady Barbara Judge just said. They have underinvested in their production. I'm talking, or ill-invested in their production. I'm talking about Europe. Generally speaking, in Germany more specifically. And I would add to our comments that they have underinvested in the grid. Not only have they allowed and encouraged renewables in, but did not invest in the grid. So they are facing very high prices. They are not interconnected. They are facing cuts or brownouts or blackouts. Their industry is has been suffering from it, and it still is. It's moving. Petrochemicals is moving back to the States. So the problem is more general than the typically reference to geopolitical context with Russia. This is part of it, but it's not a fair description of the challenges for the EU.
Okay, thanks very much. Now we're going to turn to Abdel, Ahmed, Albuainain. Now, look, what about gas then? Energy security. Is gas the silver bullet? There's plenty of it. There could be more. There's lots coming on stream. LNG capacity is rising. That's the answer, is it?
Yeah, I think just continue on what has been said. And I'm just taking the discussion this morning about the link of the budget and the oil price and all these things. And when it comes to LNG, for us, we are talking about the cross-border pipeline, which is currently Dolphin project between Qatar and UAE and Oman. And I see this is more meeting the demand of the UAE and Oman. And plus also there's less of risk, I don't see any geopolitical here in this area. I see very much of the energy security in this area. And I think LNG is being available worldwide. I think today, and will continue to be the source of the energy, especially for the electricity, whether it's available in Qatar or somewhere else. But it's going to be available, and it's going to be demanding everywhere. Then the risk of transportation, maybe, that's an issue. But it's available, but again, it's going to be based on demand. It's supply and demand.
Right. What about this drop-off in prices then? Is that a concern? Of course, I mean, you know, spot prices have gone down radically, but, you know, mostly we're talking about long-term contract prices. Is that a concern?
Marcus is always, I mean, nowadays no one wanted to have this a long-term agreement, okay? Talk about spot market, especially LNG today, it's a vital supply of energy worldwide. And here in the region, there are available LNG, and there is a huge demand for LNG, and I'm sure this demand will continue. I don't see any link with the crude price with the LNG, because it is very much driven by the demand.
Right, okay. There is a lot of competition out there, Jos Evans, in LNG, in gas provision. Is that a worry for you?
No, also building on what was just said, I mean, if you step back here, on the one hand, you see, and you heard it this morning again from all the forecasts, that the world needs a lot of energy. I mean, the forecasts say that you need about 35% by 2040. So I would say if you look at the fundamentals, there is a very strong demand. LNG has a specific role in the demand because it has more flexibility versus any pipeline, security supply-wise. I mean, Russia, question marks, but LNG provides that flexibility. Now, if you look at the demand side, and specifically LNG, I'll throw out some numbers that you have that perspective. Today we have around 220 million tons of production capacity LNG. By 2025, an additional 240 million tons is required. That means, if you look now in time frames of 5 years, at this moment, around 130 million tons are under construction. So that's fine for the demand increase, which you will see in the coming 5 years. And that demand increase and the supply is coming from various sources. Now, Australia, US. So in that sense, diversifying that supply provides more security in the LNG world. But looking the next 5 years, so from 2020 to 2025, an additional 110 million tons are required. If you take that in total, you talk about investments about $2 billion, which are required on the LNG side. So having more players coming in the LNG world is a necessity, because no one player can put up such an investment level. And I think within that framework, I think the world needs these kind of projects. And if you look, now come back to your question, I don't know if that's your question, but I will answer it anyway. If you look at the oil and the gas prices today, I mean, I would view that as a kind of the short-term perspective. If you look at the long term, all these investments will require financeability. And that means that from a pricing perspective, there has to be long-term contracts in place. And the other part is coming back to the crude side. Oil has been the traditional index for these kind of contracts in the long-term side. Now, granted, some of the old-fashioned or traditional kind of basis might get challenged in the coming 5 years, but I still fundamentally believe that to have these $2 billion kind of investments financed, long-term contracts with majority oil-linked price basis will be necessary to provide the necessary energy.
So you don't think companies will be vulnerable if they're putting down money on the table in 5 or 10 years, that those investments will be vulnerable because of an increased market, more players in the market?
No, I think it will help the market. Like I said, if you look at the growth of the market, you will need to have more players just to realize it. So I don't see it, yes, as competition, but in itself as a necessity just to provide energy to the world.
Right, okay, thanks very much. Now let's turn to some of our interactive survey questions we have. Hopefully we'll get number 1 on the board. And you have your clickers, so if you can prepare to vote on this. This really goes to the first one goes to the heart, I suppose, of the definition of energy security. And here we go. The IEA defines energy security as the uninterrupted availability of energy sources at an affordable price. Is this definition is missing the critical other side of the coin, which is reliable and predictable energy demand. Do you agree that it's missing that critical other side of the coin, or do you disagree? Should we include in that definition the predictable energy demand? So if you can vote, we'll start the clock just now. 1, agree, or 2, disagree. That's a slight majority for agreement that the definition perhaps isn't quite wide enough to take on energy demand as well. Lady Barbara Judge, what are your thoughts about this question?
Well, it's interesting. I think if you really talk about energy security, that means do you have enough energy and can you afford it? And do you have enough energy, can you afford it in your own country without being subject to geopolitical risks? But of course, if you put in the other side, which is reliable, predictable demand, that means people will keep, producers will keep producing energy in order to have enough. If the demand goes way down, that will mean that people may not keep producing, and therefore you may end up with being insecure sometime in the future. Frankly, I'm a lawyer by profession.
Right, okay.
And this is a lawyer's
question. Give me your
question.
legal view on it then, come on.
The lawyer's question is, what does energy security mean? Well, security means do you have enough, but you need to have everything, you need to have it produced at appropriate rates, so you probably need the demand side as well.
Right, so you agree. Is that what you voted?
At the end.
Right, very good, excellent. Okay, Adel, Ahmed, Albuainain?
Yeah, I think for me, I just don't like this affordable price because, I mean, the price is there, whether affordable or not affordable.
Price of energy is the price of
choice.
energy, right? I mean,
Yes,
you know, we can't make it affordable if it doesn't become affordable.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, fine. Other panelists, any views?
One view I would like to share with you. We have a major work project we call the Energy Trilemma, which calls for a balance between three pillars: energy access or affordability, energy security or reliability, and reliability, and energy sustainability. And there is no energy system that would be balanced if the three pillars are not in equilibrium. And this question refers to a leg of the trilemma pulling in one direction while the others are not
So there's
balanced.
two legs out of the three there, is there?
Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
so, and the
We
third
don't
one
have
is missing?
sustainability, environmental sustainability.
Right, okay, climate change,
Exactly.
renewables, everything
Exactly.
like that. Okay, fine. Jos?
Well, I agree with the comment made earlier. I mean, look, you can't look at energy or any market without having supply and demand. So only taking one variable doesn't work. So you need to have demand in there. On affordable, I would say, look, I believe in the market fundamentals, and the market will always work. So any energy or whatever commodity has to be affordable for a buyer, but it also has to be supportive of the investment side and supply side. So that's the balance you need to have, and the market will correct itself. This morning we heard about the price elasticity. It's low, but it's there. I mean, you see now suppliers who are doubting whether to invest for the future because of the current price environment. Just like you have seen buyers in the past year in a kind of wait-and-see mode to have new contracts on energy. So with a low flexibility, the market will correct itself. But you need to have both in your questions. You can't do on one leg.
So I think it's a general consensus that everybody agrees, certainly amongst the panelists, that this definition doesn't quite go far enough, and certainly doesn't go far enough for you. Okay, in terms of gas then, you said there will be much bigger demand rolling forward 5 or 10 years, and that, of course, this is part of the equation here. This is part of the definition. What about in the short term, though? This price elasticity, as you said, concern?
Well, think about what creates the short-term market. Short-term market means these are the available cargoes from projects which mostly have long-term agreements already, but there's debottlenecking going on. So there's a number of limited cargoes, I would say, which provide that opportunity for buyers to rely on the spot market. Now, if I look forward in the kind of 5, 10 years again, and the new projects coming up, I said that all the new projects require long-term agreements again. So with an increasing demand, that means that relatively spoken, your spot market will decrease. That means that buyers who think in a wait-and-see mode, I can rely on the spot market for a long term, will find themselves in a
priced out.
Yes. So my belief is that the current spot market, yes, is driven by call it a little bit of an oversupply perhaps, and the demand weaker. But on a fundamental basis, spot market will shrink, and will drive prices up again.
And it's only a small percentage at the moment
Yes.
in all events anyway.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
actually there's much more stability in the market than we see the prices
Yes.
represent. So it's kind of in a way a perception.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Let's turn to renewables. Lady Marie-José, come on, let's hear about your thoughts on nuclear then. You are on the advisory board in the UAE, so give us your message.
I'm a big believer. Okay.
Right,
so
okay.
remember my 3 questions about energy that you asked me before.
Sure, yep.
Energy security, energy independence, climate change, right? Okay, energy security. Do you have enough energy? If you build a nuclear power plant in your own country, you can build it as big and as much as you need. If you build it in your own country, it doesn't have to cross national boundaries. And if you were looking at climate change, we all know that nuclear doesn't emit energy, doesn't emit carbon. I want to tell one story. 7 years ago, I was in Doha, the last time I was here, and I made a speech about energy, and I thought, what am I going to tell all these people in Qatar that have more gas than God? I'm supposed to hear talk about energy, nuclear energy. So I said, well, if you have the right climate, if you need energy independence, if you have a stable government with a lot of money that can afford schools to operate particularly good plants and to educate people, I thought the GCC countries might be a place where we could see nuclear power coming in the next few years. And the Gulf Times had a big article, and it had my picture, and it said, Lady Judge sees nuclear energy in the GCC countries. And the second page of the Gulf Times had a big picture of a big businessman, and he said, Lady Judge is mad. There will never be a nuclear power plant in the GCC countries. And 7 months later, I went to Abu Dhabi, and I met Sheikh Mohammed, and he said, we're thinking about putting nuclear power in Abu Dhabi because although we have a lot of oil and gas, we think we need a mix. So you never really know. A good nuclear power plant that's well run, well financed, is always a good bit of 10 or 20% of energy to have in your back pocket.
Right, okay, but there are the public perceptions of it, and that gets in the way. I mean, how big a problem is that?
It's actually not such a problem in Abu Dhabi because we've made a big public outreach. It is well known that in many countries in the world, the people that are the most against nuclear energy are better educated women. It's the women that are worried about nuclear energy. And the only way to deal with public perception is to educate people, is to have an advisory board like they have in the UAE, and to put a woman or 2 on them, to have not just nuclear people, but teachers, nurses, mothers. And in the UAE, they have big town hall meetings like this where they explain what's nuclear energy, how is it good, what are the problems. Unless the industry talks to the public, everybody will be afraid of radiation.
But you can't get away from the long-term issues, can you, about what to do with the nuclear waste, right? I mean, how do you know, are there the answers? You think there are?
I think all kinds of energy have problems. I think
Right.
if any one kind of energy didn't have a problem, we'd only have one kind. But as far as the waste is concerned, most of the waste in the world is really a result of the Cold War. And we have to get rid of that waste from those dirty little submarines anyway. There are solutions to the waste. There are geological disposal that we're doing in Finland. There is waste that's on-site waste. The UAE, at the project I know the best, the new one, is thinking about what they do with the waste. But there are so many different technologies nowadays. I keep hearing about other ones. The waste problem is there, but so are problems in various other technologies. Right. Look at coal.
Okay, fine. Adel, you're UAE national. What's your view on nuclear? And, I mean, for that matter, you know, more renewables, alternatives to, of course, you know, the traditionals, oil and gas.
I'm fully support with the Lady Barbara about the awareness for especially the people. They need to be aware of the risk behind this, but they need to be aware of the importance of this. And as she mentioned, every technology has a cost. And for us, we also have other alternative energy, which is the solar. We have the wind, and I think we need always to work outside the box. I mean, these conventional, traditional things are available, but you cannot assure that this will be available forever. So then we need to all we need to think about what are the alternatives. And there are initiatives everywhere here in UAE, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. And I think these are initiatives, they are there, but they need to be developed. They need to be given a lot of attention, and they need to be invested in this. So I think maybe people saying that it is a little bit high cost at this stage, it's fine. I mean, I think anything at the beginning, it will come a high cost, but later on when it start spreading and then technology is made available, I think is going to be available.
So when the last barrel of oil is shipped out of the UAE and the last amount of gas is gone, where does it turn to? What's the mix, do you think, off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, recently the government summit in Dubai, which is again say that after 50 years, which we have no oil, we should be preparing from now. I mean, we have to be ready for all these. So all the alternatives around us, we need to build on it. We need to invest and work hard just to make sure that in 50 years from now, we have no issue. I mean, the only thing, if you want to get rid of all any risk, is to go back to the age which is, no air conditioning, no electricity. We go in desert and we have a camp and we have that. And we cannot do that now.
Of course. Okay, do you have a reaction?
Well, yes, again, taking a mid to long-term perspective at this, as the world economy recovers and as the world population grows from 7 billion today to close to 9 billion and less than 40 years from now, it's clear that nuclear will be part of the mix. Now, it will be part of the mix in China, most certainly, in some countries in the Middle East, most evidently in Russia. Do we see it in North America? No. What we will see in North America is refurbishment. There will be major refurbishments in North America, in Canada and in the States. Nuclear will still represent a part, an important part of the energy mix. But given the resistance from local populations, we do not see nuclear taking a larger part of the energy mix, but it will... What
part? How much?
Oh,
depends on where, I suppose, doesn't it? Region to region.
Yeah, but globally, only by a few percent, very minimal, but globally. But at the national level in China, it could be different. I mean, it will vary from country to country, depending on their own resources and depending on how they depend on coal. In the case of China, their dependency on coal is a trigger to a move to more nuclear.
Okay, so let's move to Iran briefly then. Do you think Iran's getting it right, in fact, that moving towards nuclear energy, notwithstanding the issues of whether or not it's China developed nuclear weapons? Nuclear energy, it's an oil-rich, gas-rich state. It's moving toward nuclear energy. Is it the textbook thing to do?
Well, whether it be Iran or not, and I'll come back to Iran, the world needs all the resources we can develop. Coming back to Iran, if they commit to the treaty on non-proliferation, if they probably commit not to any enrichment or reprocessing, there is a need for more energy, and nuclear is part of that mix, and whether it is from Iran or others, and as long as we have trust in the producer, Iran can do it.
Okay, fine. Okay, can we open this up to the audience then and see whether we have any questions for our panelists? They're waiting for your questions. So just put your hand up if you have a question, and we will send a microphone around. Any? No, not so far. Okay, let's turn to another. No, not so far. We have another interactive question then, number 2. Long-term energy security mainly deals with timely investments to supply energy in line with economic developments. European oil majors have slashed their spending for 2015 in response to the plunging oil price, with the average cut in capex by 6 of the region's biggest firms estimated at around 10%. What impact will sub-$70 oil have on meeting long-term energy supply security? 1, future supply squeeze after capex cutbacks, or 2, no impact, because one of the benefits of the falling oil price is that production costs also come down. Right, if you can vote on that using your clickers, we'll have 10 seconds, and we'll see how we get on. That's pretty affirmative, isn't it? Future supply squeeze after CapEx cutbacks. That's pretty clear, isn't it, Jos? What are your views?
Well, I addressed it a little bit already in the previous answer I gave, but let me say something, and it's coming back to answer number 2 too. I think one of the other elements the industry has done well is always improvement of technology and things like that. So I'm pretty confident that even in the cyclic nature of the market we are in, that at the very end, that there will be technology improvements made. There will be an impact, I think, also just on the contractor cost. I mean, some of these costs will come down. But I think also there are some, if I specifically address an LNG aspect, I mean, US has a lot of opportunity for export. But what you will see is that the projects which are based on already an existing regasification terminal, so brownfield development, will have a cost competitiveness. So in whatever kind of oil environment you're in, I think cost competitive new projects will come on. But the fundamental point is that some suppliers or some investors at the moment will take a different pause in deciding for investments versus being in $110 crude. I mean, that's evident.
Projects postponed.
Postponed or paused. I mean, paused means you might have a delay of a year or 2 years. Just like buyers, when we were in the 100+ environment, are thinking about alternative investments. I heard the coal. Why has coal been so attractive in the last 2 years? Well, because it was very competitive versus oil. And sometimes people talk about that has created some demand destruction because once a buyer has shifted to coal, it's very unlikely or it will take many years before they shift back to gas. But so that's the kind of the nature of the business we're in. But I'm confident that at the very end, the supply projects needed to meet this kind of increasing energy demand will come. I would make one additional point reacting on what I heard. The thing we never address is also energy efficiency. I mean, I'm pretty confident in the long term that, and this is not only on the cars, it's on power, it's on all the elements, that energy efficiency and providing technology in that area will be essential to meet the supply demand in the long term. So it's just an addition to the.
Totally agree.
Right, okay. Adel, what's your thoughts on this question? Future supply squeeze after CapEx cutbacks?
I mean,
companies out there pausing, as Jos says. What's your experience?
You can see it's become a habit now. Every time we have the price down, we cut project, we slow down. I think I'm in an opinion of having a sustainable approach, you know, which is like
having a long-term view.
Yeah, it's a long-term view. I mean, we don't want. I mean, just a reaction because as Excellency Al-Attiyah mentioned today, it's a wave and it is like up and down. So then, and even sometimes we have some initiatives, and when the oil price comes down, we try to postpone or cut or eliminate some of these projects. But then later on, we bring back these projects. Even sometimes these projects are not important to have; they're just less nice to have. So I think it's more of putting a strategy, less dependent on oil. Plus, we need to see what our projects require, and.
You think a longer-term strategy, but a lot of companies out there aren't doing that, are they?
Yeah, but I mean, there are a lot
There's a lot of volatility in investment right now.
Yeah. I think that's the point. I mean, it's a reactive. I mean, we should not be reactive. We should be proactive rather than reactive.
Right.
Well, investments not made now will not only hurt security, they will reduce the actual capacity. Many of the investments that have been postponed were aimed at maintaining capacity. So the longer it's postponed, the more important the threat to energy security will be. That being said, if we have to, and I believe we have to learn to live with a price of $60 or $70 a barrel. Well, investors will have to be more efficient in managing their investments. More technology and look for better investments and certainly be more efficient. And that will be demanding on companies and corporations.
What about the role of efficiencies then? You think that's going to change a lot? I mean, clearly technology, efficiencies, that can radically change the whole game.
Yes, and it will. Yes, of course it will. This is
First, it's a source of a major investment in R&D. We see it on the horizon. It's already started to show signs of impacting the industry on storage, for instance, capacity, on mobility is another case of another example. But generally speaking, in terms of efficiency and the way we do things, it will improve.
Right, okay.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I mean, coming back to the $70, I mean, whatever I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know, but if I reach $70 there, if you only go back a few years ago, the industry would be happy with $70 crude. I'm just making the point that, okay, we come from 110, yes, now for 6 months, but go back a few years and $70, $80 crude was a price I would sign up any minute. So let's also not overreact on these kind of numbers. That's my point.
So happy days, actually, overall. Don't press the panic.
Don't panic.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right. Any questions from the audience at all? Yeah, please do.
One of the things that we have noticed is that a high price of oil encourages a lot of new inventions. I mean, shale wouldn't ever really have happened if the price of oil were 60. It was when the price of oil was 110 that shale became economically viable. When the price of oil is high, people find other things to do. When it's low, then we discourage innovation. Whether that's good or bad, it is in fact what's happened over the years.
Right. US shale around the world, Europe, North Africa, I suppose, lots of areas. Let's go to one more survey question, number 3, please. Okay, so let's have a look at this. US crude stocks rose to a record of 434 million barrels last month, according to the EIA, and China has also taken advantage of lower prices to build record stocks and recently mandate Chinese refineries to store a minimum of 15 days of crude supply. Will these levels become the new norm even if prices recover towards $100? Yes or no? If you can vote now, please. Let's have the clock. So that's convincingly in favor of no. So if prices recover, then there will be less stocks taken by the US and China. What's your view, Lady Barbara Judge?
Well, I think probably if prices are low, people need and can afford to keep
stock up, right?
To stock up. When prices are high, they can't. I mean, it's just that easy.
Market economics.
It seems to me that low prices people will take advantage of. High prices, they'll wait for them to go down.
And of course, energy security is all about that, isn't it? It's about making sure you have those critical stocks in times of need.
You just need to have the capacity to have the stocks when you need them.
Which takes investment, right?
Exactly.
Okay, fine. Let me turn to you, Adel. What about in terms of the Gulf states then? We have this transitional, potentially transformative gas market going on. Is that good for the Gulf, or does that create vulnerabilities? Of course, there's now the European market, which is attractive, traditionally the Asian market. We've heard about it in Sean's session earlier on. What's your thoughts on where the Gulf is best placed? Can it take advantage of this as a great opportunity?
Yeah, I think by encouraging more of the European to invest in this region, I think that will be win-win and will be the best solution for this time.
And Qatar? Qatar's already got,
Qatar and
a
UAE
massive
and
market
Oman.
going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is a good model today.
Yeah. So more diverting more to Europe.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Jos?
Well, again, I mean, the price itself will determine how the flows will go. I mean, in the past we have had European, call it a little bit sloppy prices versus Asia, and you saw the move of gas, the flexible gas, going to Asia. So the price of the market will determine at the very end how the flow will go, and which is expected from a global market at the very end. Now, gas is not like a commodity like oil, but high level, I would say the same fundamentals are there. For the gas, which is not committed.
And your view is that prices are going to recover over time?
Well, they will recover in the sense that both buyer and supplier can have a kind of, I always call it a win-win, You can't have a lose-win situation in any of the sides. So on the long term, the price has to recover to a right balance, affordability and supporting investment.
Right, and of course then we have countries like Iran potentially coming online, depending on what happens in these talks that we have over the coming weeks and the coming months. If Iran comes online, what happens? Is that good news? Subject to all the agreements.
Subject to subject. It really depends where you're sitting. If you're sitting in Saudi Arabia or in maybe Qatar, you might not like Iran to come online. If you're sitting in a world that needs to be buying gas and oil, then Iran adds to the supply.
Right. Jos is saying that there's plenty of demand out there, and the next 15, 20 years, we'll need those countries.
And if that's the case, then Iran is a good thing. I think we cannot have too much energy in the world in order to meet what Marie-José was saying is the growing demand for energy, the population explosion, and what we need to do is be able to get that energy to countries that really need it. What really we need is to transport the energy to places that don't have grid solutions, that don't have heat and light for their children and their families. A lot of energy has to get to the places where it's needed, and if Iran can help that, that's a good thing. We all need to be looking out for the people that don't have enough energy at the moment to make sure that their children and their families and their nation can grow and be healthy.
Okay, but what about in terms of OPEC then? If Iran came online, where does that leave OPEC?
You could have asked this to...
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, perhaps the wrong question. Does anybody in the audience have any thoughts about these issues that we're bringing up here? We'd be interested to hear from you. No? It's all quiet out there. Okay, look, tell me. Yes, sir.
Barbara, and the nuclear, you made it so sweet to have a nuclear energy. Although there is people on board are suffering from the Fukushima and from the other incident in Russia, Chernobyl. Today, still they are suffering with all these technologies that Japanese have, with all these scientists that they are still suffering from this, leakage of this and damage which happens. So why you are promoting something which is not safe, and you are saying that, okay, let's make the public aware of awareness increase to accept this. It's like you are saying, let's increase the public awareness to tell them that cancer is okay. Why you are doing that? I mean, are you really have a personal interest to support this direction?
I have no personal interest, none at all. But I do advise the Japanese. I do sit on the board at TEPCO to try to put in a safety culture into TEPCO and to Fukushima. But let's look at nuclear, since you asked the question. Everybody's afraid of nuclear energy. They're afraid of radiation. Radiation is scary. We've grown up with our life. Do they have the Simpsons cartoon out here? I don't know. But in the West, they have the Simpsons. So for 20 years, people have grown up with the operator and the owner of the nuclear power plant being the villain. We can't see it. We used to go under the table. Let's actually talk about what happened in those accidents. Chernobyl, well, with respect, Chernobyl was an operator incident, but there was a design defect, there was a problem in the reactor, and the Russians didn't tell anybody for more than 10 days. So whatever could have been done wasn't done. It was the Scandinavian countries that told us. 3 Mile Island, well, 3 Mile Island was not a disaster, a failure. It was a success. There was a problem in the reactor closed down. Nobody died. Nobody was even hurt. What happened with 3 Mile Island was there was a movie 6 weeks before the nuclear accident. There was this movie in the West called The China Syndrome. And beautiful Jane Fonda, with her beautiful long hair, told us all there was going to be a nuclear accident. And 6 weeks later, there was a nuclear incident, which became an accident because the world got crazy. Fukushima. Let's talk about Fukushima. Fukushima was a very terrible earthquake. 20,000 people died from that earthquake, followed by a tsunami. Not one person died from radiation of the tsunami. But the papers, the newspapers read every day, I was sitting there, nuclear disaster, terrible nuclear disaster. actually the real problems, and we should be sad about the people that are on the trains which derailed. What happened in Fukushima was that nobody will die of radiation, but there was a very big, very overreaction with respect to the moving the people out from Fukushima. What really should have happened, and what happened is in the Japanese culture, there wasn't enough separation between the regulator and the operator. So there was in the plant a 40-year-old car that probably wasn't taken care of. Would you drive a 40-year-old car? But then there wasn't a confluence of decision makers. You know, in a nuclear reactor, the decision maker is the operator. But in Japan, they needed everybody to be deciding together. And there was a question of who can decide what to do. So first it went to the company, then it went to the prime minister. The prime minister didn't have a clue. What did they do? They sent it to the Americans. The Americans, the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Authority at that time in America, was actually anti-nuclear. And so they made a very conservative decision to say evacuate 50-mile radius. Should have probably been 10. Usually countries never go against what the host government says as far as regulation, as far as evacuation is concerned. The problems in Japan, of which there are many, are about those evacuations, about those people that had to leave their homes. But it wasn't about the radiation at the time. And every source of energy has risks. Look at coal mining accidents. Look at what's happened with oil. We all know about what happened at Macondo. I think you were exactly right. If you want to be risk-free, you should stay home. On the other hand, if you stay home, most accidents in the world, statistically, happen in your own bathroom.
And what a point to finish on. Many thanks to Lady Barbara Judge and our other three panelists. Thank you very much for coming. I think lunch is coming up, but in the meantime, over to you, Diala.